Okay, let's start with a kind of a wild idea. What if the most patriotic thing you could do was to work against your country's economic interests? Sounds crazy, right? Well, we're about to dive into a perspective that flips the whole concept of national interest right on its head.
So this whole thing kicks off with a really tough question one a young professional was actually facing. They're working for a foreign company, and their project, well, it looks like it's going to directly harm their home country's economy. Now, you'd think the answer is pretty simple, wouldn't you? Just don't do it. But that's where things get interesting. The speaker in our source material completely throws that conventional wisdom out the window. He says, no, this isn't just okay. It's actually necessary. It has to happen. That's a pretty bold statement, and it really makes you stop and ask, why? Why on earth would he say that?
Okay, so let's dig into that why. How can a potential loss for the nation be a good thing, even a necessary one? This first part really gets to the core of his whole argument.
So, from his perspective, the foreign company isn't the real enemy here. They're more like a mirror. They're just showing the cracks that are already there, the deep-seated problems inside the country. The whole idea is that a society sometimes needs that sharp sting, that wake-up call, to finally get its act together and fix what's broken.
And this quote right here, it just nails it. He says, look, our talented young people aren't leaving to be traitors. They're leaving because they're not happy with how things are run at home. It's not betrayal, it's a message. It's basically a vote of no confidence, and it's a message the country desperately needs to hear.
And that leads us to the biggest idea in this whole talk, a really powerful metaphor. He argues that South Korea is a debtor nation. But we're not talking about money here. We're talking about a moral and intellectual debt to the rest of the world. He calls it the debt to humanity. And the logic is pretty straightforward. South Korea's incredible success story didn't just happen on its own. It was built on a mountain of help from the global community. So what exactly does he mean by that? What's in this debt? Well, according to the speaker, basically everything that fueled the country's growth came from the outside. We're talking technology, new ideas, philosophies, not to mention tons of financial and material aid. And he even points to something more profound, the young blood, the actual sacrifices of foreigners who fought and died for the country. It's a pretty heavy list. Okay, so the big question is, after receiving all of that, what has the country given back? The speaker's answer is, not much. He argues that all it's done is business, just selling things. And, in his view, you can't repay a debt of ideas, aid, and human lives just by selling cars and smartphones. It doesn't even come close. So if selling stuff isn't the answer, what is? How do you repay a debt like that? This is where the speaker offers a completely different way of thinking, shifting away from the material and into the world of ideas.
And he's really clear about this. The idea of just giving money or material aid back, he calls that ignorant and insufficient, a non-starter. For him, the only real way to pay back this debt is by contributing something intellectual, something that helps all of humanity move forward. And think about what that means. It totally reframes what a nation's responsibility is. It's not about your GDP or your export numbers anymore. It's about a creative intellectual mission. The job of a country's smartest people, in this view, is to become the designers of solutions for the whole world. And we are not talking about small-time projects here. He gives a couple of huge examples, like how about designing a whole new paradigm for welfare societies that actually works? Or, just creating a plan to end global famine. These are the biggest challenges humanity faces. That's the scale he's thinking on. So if a country actually did this, if it took on these massive intellectual projects for the good of humanity, what's the payoff? Well, according to the speaker, the reward is the most valuable thing a nation could ever have. He calls it global trust, or Shinyoung in Korean. And this is way more than just being a reliable business partner. It's a deep, profound respect and security that you can only earn by genuinely contributing to the well-being of everyone on the planet. And he believes that kind of trust is more powerful than any military or any economy. Okay, so let's circle all the way back to the beginning, back to that young professional with the tough choice. After all this, what's the advice for them? After this huge philosophical journey, you might expect some complex answer. But his advice is incredibly, almost shockingly simple. He just says, do whatever you want to do. Yeah, go work for that foreign company. Follow your own path. It sounds like a total contradiction, right? But there's a really smart reason for it. And here it is, the final piece of the puzzle. By doing what's best for them, the youth become that wake-up call we talked about. Their choices, their ambition, it shines a big, bright spotlight on what's not working at home. They become the catalysts for change, forcing the system to get better. And only when that happens can the country truly start the important work of repaying its debt to humanity.
So in the end, this whole argument leaves us with a really big question to chew on. What is a nation for in our modern interconnected world? Is it just about protecting its own borders and growing its own economy? Or does it have a higher purpose, a responsibility to be an engine for solving humanity's biggest problems, and in doing so, earning a real, lasting place of trust and respect in the world? That is definitely something to think about.